Welcome to Speaking in Spoons with your host, Christina Brookman.
Hi, welcome to Speaking in Spoons, a chronically ill podcast. I am your host, Christina Brookman, and we are back with a special after party to discuss the recent interview with the director of Complicated, Andrew. With us today, we have, of course, the handsome co-host, Dr. Nate Strauss, and we have John Rodis and Donna Sullivan. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you both properly introduce yourself and your relationship to this topic of complex conditions, pediatric pain, and the uh, trials and tribulations that families are going through and have been going through for quite some time. I'm going to pass it off to Donna right now. So Donna, I'd love to hear from you.
All right, so thank you so much for having John and I today. We're so excited to be here. And I am the producer of the film Complicated that Andrew spoke with you about, but I am also a rare disease mom. I have 3 kids with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a wide alphabet list of all the comorbid conditions that go along with it. 12 years ago, I was fortunate to find a group of other moms in the Boston area with a nonprofit called the Coalition Against Pediatric Pain. And they were a group of families that had met at Boston Children's when their kids weren't really getting better after going through a pediatric pain program. So 12 years ago, nobody knew what EDS really was. I was fortunate to meet people like John Rodis and others who were kind of pioneers in the space, and they helped me to help get my children to the right specialists. But during that time, I started helping to support other families and very quickly started meeting more and more families who had really challenging and difficult obstacles, a lot of them that we cover in the film. Because of my own, if I'm being totally honest, probably trauma from our experience, I really kind of dove into advocacy. I have this belief that advocates usually are advocates for that reason. Few people say I'm going to grow up and take this on. But because of that, I not only work with the Coalition Against Pediatric Pain, but I'm a proud board member of John's organization, the Connective Tissue Coalition. And I also work with a tremendous group called Pathways to Trust. And we go in and we actually educate medical students and healthcare providers about the unmet needs of marginalized patient populations, such as those living with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I kind of dove into the space, in addition to making the film, trying to come up with other programs and ways to help just make it better for everybody with EDS. So
That's wonderful. I love what both of you do. It speaks to my heart, and I know a lot of our listeners. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for being here. And John, I'm going to pass the baton to you and let you introduce yourself.
I probably won't do as good a job as Donna did, but thank you, Christina, Nate, and Donna. I'm John Rodis. For those who don't know me, I 23 years ago became disabled due to Marfan syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I'm one of the lucky ones to have both. Since that time, I became a national disability and medical advocate, mainly because I didn't like the process of Social Security disability. I saw how difficult the process was, how depressing the process was, and the fact there was no support for us, for me, and that's why I decided to help people. So it's all started from becoming disabled. So my path took me here because of a bad situation and getting sicker and sicker. So once I started being a disability advocate, I actually met EDS for the first time in 2002 because I was approved in, I think, May of 2002. And that's when I decided to be an advocate and help people and do it. I've done it for 23 years for free. All my services are free. And when I met the first EDSer, I actually met her because one of the Marfan people I was helping had said, can you help somebody with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? And at that time, I never heard of it. So I was like, it doesn't matter what condition she has. I can help her because it's basically proving limitation. That's what matters. It's not the condition. It's proving a limitation. So as I went along, I learned more and more and more because I have a very extensive questioning when I help people build a case. So the more and more I learned about EDS, the more and more angry I got at the way it was being handled, the way the doctors were treating people, the way they would talk to. And lo and behold, many years later, I decided to start a connective tissue coalition. That's something I had been putting off for a while because I knew it would be a lot of work. And I also realized I was getting a hell of a lot done just as being an advocate, which a lot of us advocates do, because we know what it's like to deal with these problems. We know what the problems are. But I realized I'm just one person. So I think as having a organization with the Connective Tissue Coalition, I said, I'm going to bring together the best of the best, the people that really, truly get it, truly understand it, that's in their heart. They're not doing it to put coin in their pocket or put something on their resume. So that's what I've done. And Donna is on my board of directors of the Connective Tissue Coalition. And like I said, nobody makes it on any of the things to deal with this coalition unless they really, truly have their heart in all for the right reasons. So this documentary, Complicated, I am so much in support of this because this is one of the top 3 things I've seen in my work in 23 years that's disgusts me, is the fact that people can be judged and have their children taken away from them based on misinformation, poor medical management, and poor governmental controls or poor governmental systems. So that's where I feel that there are answers, and I think that this film is a long time coming, and I'm so proud of Donna and Andrew who've put this together, and the coalition will back it completely.
What would you say, Donna, what do you think you would like, and I asked this of Andrew too, what are you hoping most from the release of this film and the impact that you're looking for, the change? What are you looking for?
So part of the reason that we decided to do the film was because, it is a very multi-layered problem. And I think because it's so complicated, people can't really talk about it. And so we realized at first we have to really raise awareness and help people to understand that this really is a problem in medicine. And
Yeah.
then when people realize it's a problem in medicine, people kind of back away like, oh, that's complicated because I don't want to risk, getting it wrong and possibly harming a child, right? But what they don't
Right.
realize in their effort to protect children, they're unfortunately harming children who are more vulnerable to begin with. So I think, my ultimate hope for the film is to raise awareness and to show the human toll, what happens to people when they leave the hospital without getting help, or what happens to people when they find themselves in these really dark margins in our medical system. There's a human piece there that I think gets missed. And I think my hope is that the film will not only raise awareness of these problems that are happening, and as Andrew pointed out, not just in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but through the story of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that maybe it will help to promote more discussions and more problem solving and more solutions. Because there's a whole army, and I will tell you this, there's a whole army of advocates in the rare disease community who have been supporting these families and working on these issues for years. But because of the nature of the subject, it's a very kind of dangerous thing sometimes to talk about, because you want to maintain your own credibility in the medical community, and you want to be able to still bring your kids to see doctors, right?
Right.
I think this film is hopefully going to raise awareness, and it's going to allow a lot more of these advocates and these people that are trying to work to solve the problem come out and solve it, quicker. That's my hope.
I think that's wonderful. Like starting discussions, getting the discussion going, getting connections made, so that we can build more allies, like he was talking about. Because for those of us that is chronically ill, it is hard to do this, and for the parents that are taking care and managing this, everything of their chronically ill children, that is also exhausting. And I do think, I love that you brought up the fact that that doctors are saying, that they see complicated, they do feel like they are trying to look out for the child. And I know some people don't like to give labels because they don't want to give a child an insurance label like for the rest of their life. But unfortunately, this is what it can lead to, you know? It
Yeah.
can lead to endangering for a lifetime. It can lead to trauma, and it can lead to the judicial system getting involved, which am I right that there has been an uptick in that? It feels like that has been increasing. And I know, like, is that true? Like,
So
statistically?
I'm going to answer your question because I absolutely want to answer that question. But before we even get into that, I do want to make sure it's clear because I don't know from the trailer if people understand, this is a no fault problem. This is doctors who go into, no doctor goes into medicine to harm people.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is really more, it's a systemic issue. It's not a finger
Mhm.
point, it's not an anti-doctor, it's not anti-medicine. This is how broken our medical
Right.
system is.
Right.
Kind of. So that was the first thing. To answer your
Mhm.
question, yes, absolutely. Rare disease patient advocates across various disease states are reporting more cases. Part of the reason I think is because there's more awareness and people are being braver and coming forward with their stories. This summer, there was a film out on Netflix about a family that actually was part of the reason that we did this film, the Kowalski family.
Yeah.
And, Beata Kowalski was actually the reason that we decided to do the film. She was someone that we were helping at TCAP. And losing her was just a real kick in the gut to everybody and just really devastated everybody to let us realize how big this problem really is and how dark this problem could be. So I think, yes, I think there are definitely more cases. There's multiple reasons for that. And I can get into it if you'd like. We talk about them in the film. And we hope to roll out some education and around these topics when the film comes out. But yes, there's definitely been more cases, and there's a few reasons why that is.
I was just wondering, and um I know, like, there was a huge uproar with like the Munchausen's by proxy with Gypsy Rose case, and I didn't know if, I know that's you know completely different kind of thing, but I know sometimes, as a community, as a country, we can kind of go in an opposite extreme trying to do a good thing, you
Right.
know?
Right. In cases like Gypsy Rose Blanchard, I mean, that was a horrible thing. And the idea, the topic of Munchausen by proxy, it is a very serious psychological condition, but it's one that really is a lot more rare than people think.
Right.
Yeah.
I have the number somewhere here, but
Very rare. Yeah.
the reason that you're seeing an uptick, well, there's multiple reasons. Of course, it's a complicated answer, hence the title of our film. But one of the things is that there's a new type of child abuse. Back in the 1990s, Dr. Carol Janney and her husband, Dr. Tom Rossler, wrote a book about medical child abuse, and they gave that term to the world, medical child abuse. And it's the idea that a child could have too much medical treatment or could be over medicalized. And
Right.
if that is the case, who is to blame? And unfortunately, when they came up with the criteria for what does someone look like who might be committing medical child abuse, the characteristics of that type of person that could be abusive is very similar to the characteristics of what a rare disease parent might be.
Right.
There's an overlap in the diagnostic definition, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And it's
Yeah.
scary and sad because it's people trying to do a very good thing. It's just, you know, there are rare disease, chronic disease that has that overlap. And John, I think this would be a wonderful opportunity if you could talk about the jewels that you're so
Yeah.
good at talking about, because I think that would be beneficial to families and doctors, because I think people can get so overwhelmed with all of the symptoms, all of the
Yes.
different disorders that can come. Like when you have EDS, you might have like 100
Mhm.
other million things, and it just overwhelms people.
Mhm.
So how can we break it down and make it a little less scary?
Yeah, like you mentioned, jewels. I call them jewels. It's short, sweet information that really goes pointed to the problem. Say, what for years and years ago, I wrote an article, Awakening Others, about the challenges of having a disability. And in the article, I really wanted to get through the fact is what an invisible disability is, and also what fatigue and pain is like. So I brought up having a cold or having a flu. So if you're trying to get a doctor to understand how you feel with your strong fatigue, tell them it's like having a flu every day. Or if it's pain and fatigue, it's like, having a cold, but, as milder, if it's a milder day for you. So the jewels there's many, many jewels I have. But one thing that's really, really important specifically to medical child abuse, medical accusations, is misinformation. That is the crux of the problem. In my career, I was an executive consultant. I was the one that people come to, or corporate would come to figure out a problem. And the reason why this is spun out of control is because they're not listening to the doctors that treat the patients. That's part of the
Right.
problem. They don't understand the condition. The whole reason why there's this constant going to new doctors and new doctors, because they're not getting the right care, because the doctors aren't doing their homework to see what is this possible condition. Oh, if they knowing that the condition that they have, especially if you're in a hospital and a family says in the record there's POTS, there's mast cell, these are the things that are in the file that can cause the ailments that brought them actually into the emergency room in the first place. But as far as child, and this is really important, is when people ask me about, well, how can you kind of dispel when someone's being falsely accused? How can you prove it? Well, one thing is, if a lot of EDSers have easy bruising, you know, they have blood issues, they bleed, blood clotting issues, tearing of the skin is very easy. Fractures are extremely low. Bone density is extremely common in EDS. So children, even though they're more flexible, EDSers are far more flexible than other children are. So all of those things together on the outside could look like abuse, but it's not abuse. It's the actual condition and how the body reacts to its environment. It's natural. It's not abuse. Other jewels I use, like for pain, I'll talk about a Novocaine. I mean, not a Novocaine, a toothache. Because when I try to explain to doctors what pain is like and pain relief is like, because we know that's a whole other thing we could talk about in another podcast, is actually dealing with pain and the whole movement of getting, like you went through, Christine, when you were in the hospital recently. They don't want
Yeah.
to give you kind of a pain pill for it. So I say to them to describe pain, I'll say it's like we have a toothache in the back of our neck or in the lower part of our back. And they're like, it's that bad? Like, yeah. Can you imagine having that kind of pain and not having anything that you can give relief to, or have something that can only relieve it for a couple of days, which is insane because it's chronic pain, it's chronic
Yeah.
daily issue. So the jewels revolve around teaching something in a very short period of time that is very specific. So the fatigue, the cold, the flu. I have multiple ones that I use, but in relation to this, it does all come down to ignorance. Like Donna said, there's a lot of wonderful doctors. It's just, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So EDS is far more than stretchy skin. I'll leave it at that.
Well, if for medical professionals listening, if hopefully we're getting some out there, what would you say might be the most um in the most like if you could list like your top 3 things that you're hearing the most of misinformation?
Doctors in general, or regarding this subject matter.
I guess doctors in general, but that leads into this subject matter.
Yeah, I think one of the things I try to get across, especially to young medical students and to young doctors, is that it's really good to, if you're wondering what something is, you have a patient in front of you and they have symptoms. Have someone, if you're not going to do it yourself, have someone throw in those systems into Dr. Google, and usually it'll spit up the condition. I mean, 90% of the time it does. And so that's an easy way to suspect a condition, and a doctor should use that ability to do that. But the other thing is that we have invisible disability, which is one of the worst things you can have. Not just EDS, but multiple conditions are invisible.
Right.
So I explain as one of my jewels. I'll say, explain it to your doctor that on the outside, I look fine. But on the inside, I have a hurricane going on, and it's constant. It's just never, ever ends. And that's another thing is another jewel is talking about the fact that chronic means it's constant. It's not, it's not acute pain, it's chronic pain. So we're the areas that hurt the most is they're running on misinformation, meaning that there's research, very small amounts of research, very small studies that they're basing the psychological component on.
Right.
So they're saying, oh, EDS is mostly psychological. No, it's not. It has an element of psychological issues. Of course it does, but not to the degree that a lot of doctors think it does because of this poor research that's being looked at as something that's almost like, or a criteria on something that hasn't been formally researched. I mean, you know what I mean? That can be very dangerous because most doctors I talk to that don't know the condition, they think that's the condition that's stretchy skin, and it doesn't cause pain. That's what a lot of doctors have said to me. And that's just a matter of education. And for all of us, not just as advocates, but mainly organizations, the purpose of the coalition, other than to drive research, well-vetted research, is to get the accurate information out there, because that's what they need. And they're busy. And I work with doctors, and I know that they don't want to harm anyone.
Busy.
They want to help people. But if they're running on misinformation, when they have a short amount of time, things are going to happen. And unfortunately, they're going to be bad. And the other element is gaslighting. And this is also a part that affects this subject, is the gaslighting of they look at the records and they see how many doctors were, or a doctor put in there that this is a somatic disorder, or this mother is hysterical. She's just trying to get attention. Right. That's kind of shit. Just excuse me. That kind of stuff shouldn't happen. It's just it's not good medicine. You need to work on facts. That's what's most important. What's actually going on. And then when a child is in a situation where they're in the hospital and they were thinking about taking the kids, the doctors that treat those patients that see that child should be contacted, and no decision made until they go through the records and have a conversation.
I think it's also very sexist, and it happens towards mothers, and if your child is going through this, you're experiencing this, and you're trying to protect your child and get the best care for your child, why wouldn't you be crying? Why wouldn't you be experiencing this?
I try.
It's a perfectly normal reaction.
Yeah, in my advocacy, I always say I always say this to people. Yeah. How about if it was your daughter that was treated like this? Not just about medical child abuse. I'm talking about just basically, ignored. Or how would you feel? That's why I've gotten people to kind of wake up and go, how would you feel if you weren't believed? And you're right, Christina, women are far less believed than men. The whole culture, the words that we use, the medical word, hysterectomy, hysterical. I mean, come on, we need
histrionic. A lot of histrionic. I think it's still in the DSM.
Yes.
But yeah.
Sorry,
Donna, I'd love your opinion on this.
I was going to say, this is a really great discussion to be having, because there is an element of misogyny in medicine, which we know. And undoubtedly, we see single mothers being targeted more frequently, and definitely women much more frequently than men. We don't want to, we explore a lot of themes in the film and a lot of the challenges that people come up against. And, there are definitely the challenges of process, like you were talking about, John. If an accusation is made, why aren't the specialists who have treated the child, or maybe treated them years even before, being part of the process to kind of
exactly.
There's definitely the process side, but there's also kind of the navigation healthcare side. And I don't want parents to watch this film and become afraid. We just want to open eyes, as Andy said, and we want them to be aware. And there's things you can do when you're navigating. Like, I love that John was sharing the idea of his jewels, which he has so many great, examples of. And it's that idea of when you are taking your child for medical care, you definitely want to respect the physician's time and expertise. And I think sometimes families, when you get in there, you've been waiting for so long to get this appointment and you have so much to share. And sometimes that can overwhelm physicians. And I
Yeah.
think, certain things that when parents are navigating, that can be done to help families navigate safer. And some of those examples would be, working, recognizing there is a communication problem between specialists,
Right.
involving your PCP in as many of the medical decision-making things as you can, but also documenting that with an email or a letter, and then making sure your specialist. It's not uncommon for people with rare diseases, especially EDS, to have to access care in various healthcare systems, right? Because your
Right.
specialist won't necessarily even be in the same state that you live in.
Exactly.
So, there's definitely kind of navigation things that families can utilize to help make accessing healthcare safer if they feel like they're, a family that might be targeted.
Targeted.
And the other big issue, which is a huge issue, is the whole idea of psychological labeling and psychological misdiagnosis. There is a huge role for psychology in chronic illness. Patients need support. Patients need to learn how to live with these conditions. Unfortunately, what we see, and we see it very clearly in the film, is that you can have physicians who are not trained in psychology putting something in someone's file, and then the echo chamber just goes, and that suddenly becomes
Yeah.
fact. And that's very hard to come back from when that happens.
And I usually notice it's people that just basically are like, I don't know what it is, so it must be psychological, and they put that term. I for myself, I found, and it took years to develop this. I've noticed doctors, I mean, they don't have a lot of time with you. They're seeing a lot of people. When you have a chronic illness, you've got multiple doctors, your file is like this big. It's, so it's hard for them to look through it. So I kind of created a cheat sheet that helps them, like it gives my basic information. It gives all the names of my specialists, what they treat me for, their contact information, and then all the names of my diagnoses. And then all of my allergies alphabetical, all of my medicines alphabetical, but then also the schedule of when I take my medicines, and then why I take each medicine. Because sometimes medicines, are for, particularly for certain conditions, they're like, oh, that might be for a psychological reason, but no, I'm actually taking this for pain. So it's important for them to know that.
And that's fabulous. That's a great example of one of the tactics.
And going to a new doctor, I'll even create a timeline of these. I'll break down all of my symptoms. And I actually got this from one of the geneticists I went to because they wanted me to do something. So now I do it all the time for anybody, all of my symptoms by body area, and then I do a timeline of when I started developing these. So I can also attach that to like on our website, like a practice version or something. And because I do think it has helped me a lot moving forward with my own medical care, and I think it might help parents present with hopefully
it makes you a better partner in your own care, because now you're not overwhelming the physician.
Right.
Yes.
Now, and I honestly think, it's funny because you talk about the binders. For a long time, people went in with binders. I went in with binders in the early days.
Yeah.
I realized very quickly that was not helpful. The way I hoped I was trying to be helpful, but it wasn't always being received.
It's overwhelming. Yeah,
it's overwhelming.
Yes.
And so, we, in the Pathways to Trust program that we do, we talked a lot about, your one sheet. Come in with your one sheet. Because the nice thing is, like, God forbid you're in the hospital. Now we know what that's like, right? You're always changing shifts. You have different nurses, different
Yep.
doctors. No one has time to communicate. But here you have your piece of paper, and it has everything that this person needs to know about you. So yeah, I
Yes.
think that's a brilliant
Yeah.
example.
And go in with multiple copies, because I realized at my last
Yes.
hospital visit that sometimes someone will take it and say they're putting it in the computer, and it never happens. And then I winded up about to go to surgery, and the anesthesiologist didn't have the correct information, and I
Right.
didn't have a copy anymore. So like, yeah, that was terrifying. So and then and then on another trip, someone had entered it who had access to enter it that maybe shouldn't have, because the pharmacist came up and I was like, let's sit and talk about your medications, because somebody put in a medication that is only available in another country. So I don't think you're on this medication. So
You
Oh
yeah,
have
my
a lot
God.
of pull.
yeah, we had a good time talking together, but yeah, it's about
Yeah.
creating that communication, that relationship with
Mhm.
your medical team, because it is a partnership. And when it's, I think the parents are going through trauma and finding ways, and the kids are going through trauma, and unfortunately right now, like, finding ways to get them in a space where they can go um and communicate clearly to the medical professionals, so they're not seen as like the hysterical
Yeah,
or
all
whatever,
over the
which is
place.
honestly
Yeah.
a perfectly normal reaction. But also
Right. Well, and
communicating
no,
to the
and no judgment.
medical,
Right.
yeah,
And it's funny
like,
because you can't win either way. There's no judgment there because you have a right to be upset and emotional if you're
Right.
suffering.
absolutely 100%.
What we
Right.
find, funny enough, when we look at the diagnostic criteria for Munchausen, it's someone who's calm when things aren't good. And I'm also
Yeah,
like, well, now you're being judged either
Yeah.
way.
yeah,
Yeah.
what do
Well,
you,
one of the things I do in my work is I always tell people important to build a strong medical team around you and your children. That's crucial because they have a better chance of helping. Even though I said, which is unfortunately, sometimes they don't go to those doctors when you're in a situation where you're in an emergency situation. But having that team have a better shot, especially if they're with that hospital, of getting better
right,
support and a less likelihood of having more issues. But the other thing I was going to say was, since I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've worked with a lot of different types of people and specialties, I've I've learned a lot about what doctors have to deal with and what hospitals deal with, because some of these people I've been working with have become friends and they've spent a lot of time teaching me. What's important about that is one of the jewels that one of the doctors taught me was, when you go in to see one of the doctors, you shouldn't be talking about your feet if you're going to see a cardiologist. So you
right,
have to be specific. And then also, don't go in with 10 things. Go in with the most 3 things, the most
yep,
important things for that specialist. And that'll make your time with them. And they should appreciate that, and you'll get more done. And
yeah,
then lastly is, this is more me than them, but they agree with this, is your doctor will never understand your limitations and your quality of life unless you explain it to them. And that's really very paramount to everything, and especially for children. And I know children, it's hard for them to speak for themselves, but yeah, it's very important for a doctor to understand what they are going through. So
right,
the child, they think, well, they're just having growing pains. That's what, no. Yes,
it's
they're having
not,
growing pains because they're growing, but they have a condition that causes issues because it's degenerative, it's weakened tissue, it's weakened bone. So they're going to have more pain, they're going to have more fatigue and more degeneration than I call them the normies, the normie population, the people that don't have much issues. So no knock on the normies, so don't get mad at me, you normie people.
what advice would you give to parents that do find themselves in a children's hospital medical situation? What is the best first thing that they can do if it looks like it's going down a negative pathway?
I'll let Donna answer that one.
So I have worked hundreds and hundreds of families that have found themselves in that situation. And I think it's really important to kind of understand, that this is a systemic issue that for whatever reason you're being flagged and you're falling into. If you're undiagnosed, this is a little harder, but if you have a rare disease diagnosis, I always recommend that you reach out to your nonprofit or your patient support group to see if there's anyone there that has experience helping families that find themselves in this situation. There are organizations like the Family Resource Justice Center, and we actually have something that we're launching called the Do No Harm Project, which is just a way to try to help families that find themselves in this situation and to kind of arm them with just information about how to proceed. It's tough because, unfortunately, what we find in these cases when children are actually, taken custody of, it can happen, for various different reasons. So it's really good to get in touch with someone who maybe has seen some of these cases or might understand why you're being flagged, right?
Right.
Might be. And like I said, sometimes it can just be the concern over medicalization, which is a very real problem in medicine. There's been all studies done about it. So, but again, it's not really shouldn't be the parents' fault. So I think, the first thing I would say is, contact your rare disease group, see if there's anyone there that has experience with this issue. Definitely contact your PCP. If they are having team meetings or talking about taking custody, absolutely get yourself an attorney immediately. And, it's funny. I had a doctor once say to me, when I was in medical school, they always said, if you suspect something, flag it. You suspect something, flag it. And it never occurred to me that if I flagged it, child abuse, welfare systems, and the legal system really aren't doctors. They're not really set up to solve these. And that's kind of what happens, unfortunately. A doctor will kind of throw the flag, the process will start, and they don't realize that this process could put this family in court for years. So you can kind of get your PCP involved, get any specialists who have been involved in your child's care. As soon as you get that concern, get whoever in your medical team you think can help, help get everyone involved as quickly as you can to try to stop it before it gets to a place where the courts are involved. Because once that happens, it's a much longer process, and that can be, even more traumatizing for children if they're taken away.
Of course, because it's like they're being held hostage, without being able to speak with their families, and that's
correct.
Not understanding why.
We've had children who have literally been taken from their home and placed hours and hours away with no access to family members or school or friends. And, children have rights. These parents have rights.
Yeah.
And, and so that's another area. But, for me, it's more just, I think from a medical awareness standpoint, no, even child abuse physicians don't want to be causing harm. They are causing harm for all these systemic reasons you're going to learn about in the film. But there's got to be a path forward. There's definitely, there's a lot that can be done to make families safer. We just need to start doing it.
And I think you're totally right with the, sorry, John, I was just going to say, with the new, what Andrew had talked about, the new specialization, and then it goes to CPS. But you had mentioned, Donna, the family you'd worked with where unfortunately the mother is now deceased, and the trauma that family went through. And it seemed from that film, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like that film, like they were saying that once it hits that judicial system, they're very much going to be listening to the medical professionals, and CPS is like the doctors may not be involved, but all of their reports are. So anything they've said, and so that's important for doctors out there. Anything that you write down, I mean, that is affecting these children and their families. So you need to be very thoughtful with how you word what you write in your reports. And am I right that the parents, even with their lawyers, cannot introduce their own doctors, or is that incorrect?
Once it hits the legal system, you would be surprised how little rights the families actually have.
Wow.
sometimes, we have a case right now, the mother's for 3 years been trying to get access to her child's medical records so she can defend herself and get her child back, and she can't get access to those records. So once it hits the legal system, it definitely gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
But things like you're saying, and I apologize, I've got a little brain fog in myself. Things like, can you get your medical records? No. Can you, when you go into the court system, a lot of times you get single parents, right, that maybe can't afford lawyers, so they have
Right.
court-appointed attorneys are so overwhelmed by this. And the very fact, I remember what your question was, the very fact that a physician is making the accusation, there seems to be a tendency for the judges in the courts to take it at, a doctor said it, so it must be true.
Right.
And so the physicians bear a lot more weight, and the families are basically, the moms especially, are guilty until proven innocent. And it's, I have had experiences with, cases of actual, there was drug use in the family, and I was amazed at how quickly those families had access to their children.
Wow.
Yeah, so there is a double standard there, but I think it's the kind of thing that people just need to understand. Like in the Kowalski case, which you were talking about, there was also a lot of psych misdiagnosis that was in there as well, that was thrown out as fact, right? There was a lack of awareness of her medical condition that was also thrown out as fact.
Right.
And I think that's what they take it as fact. The other thing I did want to correct, because you did make a comment earlier about the hospitals hire the child abuse physicians. In some states, that's not even the case. Sometimes they're being paid by the child welfare departments.
Okay.
So physician doing an investigation, being paid, right, compensated for finding abuse.
Right.
Thank
doesn't
you
make
for that
sense.
correction. So would it be good to always make sure then to make sure after every appointment, after any hospitalization, get a copy of your records that you are
Yes.
keeping on hand, because then you don't have to worry about that when I mean, you can't get the hospital's records, but you can get stuff to back up what you had before.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to get your medical records. And the reason I say that is because you would be surprised how many times, I'm sure you both have had it yourself, you get your medical records and you're like, that's not what happened, or that's not right, or this
Yep.
isn't.
Yeah, they write they have to put in their story, but it's not always how things actually, it's more them trying to get the job done.
Yeah.
I
And
literally had,
I'm not saying any of it's nefarious or wrong.
Yeah,
It's just
no.
Sometimes
well,
they
there's a new system too with the checks that happens.
Yeah.
And a lot of times doctors will copy a report, like one appointment to the next appointment. And I was denied a resource because they circled it, because the doctor, like, I have mobility issues, and it was literally an appointment to get a new prescription for a new wheelchair. I already have wheelchair. It was for a new one, but he had, marked, I'm no, not intentionally, but it was probably just a recheck, or one of his nurses just checking it over, that my gait was normal, I was like, what?
and that
So
can say
yeah,
the problem of, it's not going to get improved by insurance, then you have to appeal. And
Right.
exactly.
I've been to that problem too.
Yeah, we all know there's so much work that goes into being a patient, especially a chronically ill patient. It's a job into itself. So I don't want to
Yeah.
say that people have to do this to stay safe. Absolutely not. And again, this film is not to, to scare people. It's just to raise awareness that there is this population that this is happening to.
Right.
And if they find themselves in this suddenly strange place, because, I'll be honest, when I first started my journey, I didn't believe it was a thing. Who would believe this was a thing? And even when we started fundraising,
well, you don't know the system is broken until you actually have to use it. It's like a kitchen faucet. Like, you don't know the faucet's broken because it looks like it's working because it's never been touched.
Right.
But as soon as you have to get water from it, you're like, oh, there's a leak in this. Like, it's just something's not right about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the system is, once you have, I think it works perfectly. Like, it seems like it works great until you actually get a little farther into it and really have to use it. And then it kind of it's just not, I don't know if I've said this before. I just don't know if the system was ever built for the load that it's getting.
I
No,
don't think so. And it's
no.
not, and the way it's set up, it's so specialized. Like I truly believe, and I hope
That's it.
that we're at the verge of a revolution in medicine, that eventually things are going to shift, and it's not, people won't have to access healthcare the way they do now. This isn't just a patient, this is a doctor's frustrate. Like the medical people that work in medical systems and medical, they'll tell you it's a mess.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a mess.
Yes. So you can just basically do is chip away. Instead of giving up,
Yeah.
we all chip away and chip away and chip away. And then what Nate said, a lot of the reason why the system is the way it is that most people aren't aware of these things. They're just not
That's
aware.
it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to use it. My brother is a doctor, and he would
Mhm.
say the medical system's working like a Swiss watch, like because he doesn't see it from the patient's
see
end.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, he sees it from his end,
Yeah.
and from his end, it's working great.
exactly.
For a lot
Yes.
of people and a lot of people with lesser medical issues, it is working great, right? Something
Yeah.
you test it, you get a cure, and you move on.
But then, of course, we don't fit the box. Most medicine is in a box. That's how they trained the people like Ehlers-Danlos and other connective tissue conditions. We're outside that box, and that's the reason why there's all these issues. Because we don't EDS more than any other condition that I work with, or hundreds of conditions. It has the most most conditions involved with it. Mast cell, POTS, TMJ, on and on and on and on. And that is, and then the other aspect of gaslighting is, when they always throw the psychological part of it, they go, this family has psychological issues, this mother has psychological issues. Like, well, the psychological issues that you're claiming doesn't cause tethered cord or Chiari malformation or TMJ,
Right.
all these structural things. So you're not doing it in a very mean way, but you're just showing them that, no, this condition is mostly structural, somewhat psychological. What makes it worse is when you don't believe me and you treat my kids and myself like shit. Excuse my language again. Sorry.
Well, I mean, wouldn't you be stressed and depressed if you were dealing with all of this stuff? Which I
Absolutely.
know that I've heard you say,
Yes.
and particularly as a parent, panicked about, desperately wanting to protect your child. And but advocacy is education. So that's what's so great about this documentary is bringing awareness to this issue, bringing out education, hopefully looking at how we can bring about correcting some information, like you said, and while like Nate said, like it is working for most people, there are more, and Nate has said this frequently, we are having more and more complex conditions happening. And even though there are rare conditions, there are hundreds of rare conditions. So like the whole zebra thing, like is a little bit of misinformation in and of itself, because zebras are everywhere. So it is important to learn about these conditions. And also hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos is not rare.
It is not rare.
You
Absolutely.
will
And
see
that's harmful in the medical
children
education.
with those conditions. Yeah.
Exactly. Doctors feel, they've told me, doctors said, when I hear rare, I don't think I need to know it. I'm not going to see it. Well, you're seeing it every day, you're just not recognizing it. And
Yeah.
That's kind of why I think when Andy, said I'll do the film, it was so glaringly obvious how historically under-resourced and under-researched.
Yeah.
And Christine, I love that you brought up, in your talk with him about long COVID, because it was sadly a silver lining for Ehlers-Danlos, because at least the world now knows about dysautonomia.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
True.
and now like the hospital in the town, the research hospital where I live, actually now has a dysautonomia clinic, which they didn't have until long COVID came along. So it's now it's like, oh, it is real and it's profitable. But these are things that people, awareness, education, is advocacy, and then creating those allyships, because we need normies, and we need people to be helping
Yeah.
support families, and some people don't have families.
They don't.
You know,
Most people,
there are kids and adults that don't have families or don't have supportive families, like Andrew was saying how he didn't
yeah.
believe his sister at first, you know, and now they have wonderfully been able to repair that relationship. But
Mhm.
having
Mhm.
a condition like this that you're already having to deal with everything that you're dealing with, and then not having your loved ones
Oh God,
believe you
it's
is
hard.
horrible.
And some of them you're never gonna. I tell people that some of them you're
Yeah.
never ever gonna convince. So just let it go, because they're just a
Yeah.
waste of your time. But I want to say one thing I just realized, which is I think really important. This film can be utilized in the medical community with medical students,
Yes.
because they can have a real good whiff of something they've never had heard anything about, and then go and then maybe in their mind say, I don't want to cause someone harm. I don't want to break up a family on quick judgment, on a quick
Yeah.
decision that I don't have facts with, you know?
And
Um,
maybe I've been dealing with incorrect facts and making these judgments. Because, like
yeah,
you guys said, nobody goes into becoming a doctor to hurt people, to hurt children, to hurt families or
yes,
adults, you know?
no,
So, getting them better information, I think
yes,
they would definitely appreciate.
and,
And like you said, Nate, like it's really hearing from the perspective of the patient. Like they see it, you know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then
mhm,
it's gone. Like in this documentary,
mhm,
you get to see the whole trajectory of how their
mhm,
interaction
yeah,
affects, you know, and that's so vital. And I'm so grateful to you, Donna, and Andrew
yeah,
for making this film happen, and for you, Jonathan, for being here today, because I know this has been a big passion issue for you for many, many years. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to leave our followers with? And Donna and Jonathan, I would love to post your information on our site as well. And after the episode, any like you were talking about, Donna, organizations and things that parents can look to when they're needing help, things like that, would be great.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I would just say, you know, I hope people will watch the film when it comes out. I hope people in the medical community will learn from the film about the human experience that they may not be necessarily seeing. And I hope people will see this. You know, I loved your question, Andy, about what do you want people to get from it? Because it is deep dark, right? I talk about we deal with some really deep dark things.
oh God,
Right.
Unless we can recognize deep dark things exist and create a safe space to talk about them, we're never going to fix them. So I think
Exactly.
that's my
yeah,
ultimate hope is that you know,
Mhm.
from this film we can kind of start a movement to do
mhm,
better and make rare disease kids and their families safer.
yeah, and
Thank you.
focus on the motto, do no harm, and that's what the producer of the film, Donna, is doing. I'm doing a survey. Do you want to mention quickly about that, or?
No, that's fine. Yeah, sure. I'm sure. Absolutely. Well, the other thing I was going to say, yeah, so we are trying to do a survey. So part of the other problem with this issue is that, you know, nobody's tracking it. So for years we would go to like CPS, it's, you know, how many of your cases are medical? Oh, we don't know. There's actually
Mm.
one state now that is starting to track medical cases. So because there's not a lot of information out there, there's a group of rare disease patient groups that have come together. We've designed a survey and we're going to start distributing that survey, hoping to go across as many rare disease states as we can to start learning more about kind of what are the conditions that are being flagged more frequently. I can tell you,
Okay.
I see all EDS, mitochondrial disease all day long,
Yeah.
but I know there's a lot of, we've had other diseases come forward that are also having similar challenges. So we are going to work on a
Mhm,
survey with a bunch of
good.
groups. We're trying to get that out in the next 2 weeks, just so we can start having some data, so we can make more informed awareness campaigns. And then the final thing I just want to say, you know, we didn't really talk about the families who
Yeah.
I'm forever grateful to for opening up their homes and their hearts and taking some very
Yes.
serious risks in terms of their own vulnerability medically and within their own
Mhm,
lives to come forward and share their stories. So, you know, when you watch the film, just know that there is so much love and gratitude, and I hope support that will be around these people who were brave enough to stand up and share some of their dark moments with us, because it is a problem of shame and stigma, right?
It
So
Yes,
is.
when people
it
are
is.
accused, they're labeled for life, and I have a lot of really hard stories of what happens when that happens, but these families were particularly just brave, and I'm hoping that medicine will become better because of that. So that's
They're
Yeah.
they've done it. Their bravery is leading to a step in what I'm hoping, like you guys are talking about, in like a medical revolution, a
Mhm.
rare disease and chronic illness revolution, and how we join
Mhm.
together and educate for advocacy.
Yeah, and it has to be a truly united front, not just a bunch
Yeah.
of talk. I'm tired of
So
talk, I want the action. And this is what this film's going to do. And I promise the coalition is going to back anything that can help. And multiple conditions. It's not just my coalition is not just EDS, Marfan's, disease, and all the comorbidities. It's a lot of initiatives that can affect everybody in the country. So we need to get the misinformation stopped and the facts out there, and then actually have better quality of care for all of us. It affects everyone.
well, thank you both for coming on today and
Thank you.
sharing advice and great discussion, information, and as you said, Donna, thank you to the families
Yes.
for their bravery for putting their real lives out there, especially with litigation. That's
And yeah, amazing.
that's very brave. So
Yeah.
thank you to them as well. And for those that are listening or watching, we will have information on our website specifically for this after party regarding both Donna Sullivan and her organizations and Jonathan Rodis as well. So you can get as much information to help prepare you as a parent, as an adult. Um, and also, if you are a medical student or within the medical community, I'm hoping this will reach you as well. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and save your spoons.
If you want to contact us, please send a DM or email to speakinginspoons@gmail.com with any stories you have or would like to interview with us on any of our upcoming topics. And check out our website for all of our upcoming episodes and what's happening in the Speaking in Spoons community at www.speakinginspoons.com. Thank you for listening to Speaking in Spoons, and have a great day.